This is Pukeology Podcast, where science meets your hilarious puke stories and the tips and tricks to stop that chuckle that you need.
You never know what's going to spew out of her mouth. Here's
my mama,
Dr. Puke Nemo.
Did you know that an ectopic pregnancy happens 1 out of every 50 pregnancies? That's a 2% chance that we or someone we may know and love will have a tubal pregnancy. So what is it exactly? What are the causes of an ectopic pregnancy and how is it treated? This is a surgical emergency that needs to be addressed. In this episode of Pregnancy Pukeology Podcast, episode 23, Ectopic Pregnancy Complications. Want to learn more about morning sickness? How about no more pregnancy nausea or headaches or migraines? Visit our sponsor, nomonausea.com, the only natural way to instantly stop your worst nausea, vomiting, or headaches now. Or just place the No More Nausea band on your baby registry for your delivery bag at Bye Bye Baby stores, or get it shipped for 2 days for free on Amazon as a Prime vendor. And your little ones are always taken care of with No More Nausea Kids, which is the first and only kids available upset tummy relief from your local CVS store. Pregnancy humor that may just make you want to pee your pants, like you don't have to pee all the time anyway, with hilarious stories like laughed my puke out, does fuzz belong in your juice, and scared to puke. If you want to learn more about your pregnancy, humor and knowledge is the key to help you survive these 9 months. And just know we're in this together. Today, you will learn the science behind what an ectopic pregnancy is, signs and symptoms that you are having an ectopic pregnancy, and potential risk factors that put you at an increased risk for having one, and 3 treatment options that are available and will be discussed. Also, your probability of having a successful pregnancy after an ectopic pregnancy.
The science of puke, pukeology.
Ectopic pregnancy, sometimes called a tubal pregnancy, is when the fertilized egg attaches to the outside of the uterus. Most ectopic pregnancies occur in the fallopian tubes, and that's why it's called a tubal pregnancy. And remember, your tubes are not designed to hold a growing embryo, so it must be treated. Think of a hose or a shower drain. If you keep putting hair in it, the hairball builds up. This creates a blockage, and the hairball that keeps growing and growing will not let water through. That's an ectopic pregnancy. This episode of Pukeology Podcast is a little bit difficult for me just because of the fact I've had some family friends as well as some of my best friends who have unfortunately had ectopic pregnancies, but it's exciting to note that they recently just had their babies. This is a question that came from a reader because of the fact that they had an ectopic pregnancy and were curious to know when and or if it's even physically possible for them to have another baby or try for one. Is it safe? So what exactly happens when an ectopic pregnancy occurs? These can happen for a majority of reasons. Number 1, infection or inflammation of the fallopian tubes, causing it to be partially blocked or entirely blocked. 2, scar tissues from the previous infection or a surgical procedure. This is one of the largest complications of women getting pregnant after having her tubes tied. 3, previous surgery in the pelvic area or on the tubes, which can cause an adhesion. An adhesion is just kind of like your body's internal scar tissue that basically forms together and makes it very, very sticky. That very sticky stuff, unfortunately, hardens. So think of it as basically like that blockage again, something that hardens and builds up over time. Abnormal growth is number 4, or a birth defect resulting in an abnormal tube shape. If you're sitting here probably thinking, well, how do I know if I'm even going to have an ectopic pregnancy myself? These are a few of the typical signs and symptoms that will help you recognize that you're having one. Number 1, HCG levels that are lower than expected for your gestational age. So I'll say that again. If you go to your doctor and all of a sudden your HCG levels, which is human gonadotropin levels, are lower than it's expected, you may want to start being concerned. Sharp or stabbing pain that comes and goes in varying intensities. Usually you'll feel it on one side of your pelvis or another. Sometimes you can feel a hard ball if it hasn't ruptured. The pain that can be felt in your pelvis, it can also be felt in your abdomen or even up to your shoulder and neck region if it gets so bad that the actual tube itself erupts. And what you're feeling in your shoulder and neck is your internal blood that's building. It's referred pain just because of the fact that our internal organs are smooth muscle, they're not striated muscle, and they're not innervated by nerves that can be very specific. You poke someone in the hand, that can give you a specific location. You poke someone inside their internal gut, and they're going to shoot pain from multiple areas. That's the reason why if you've ever had serious constipation, or if you've just ever had an upset tummy virus, like a rotavirus or something like that, you kind of get referred pain all over the place. Vaginal bleeding is also another symptomology that can kind of give you the clue, hey, if you are pregnant and you are bleeding, please go see your OBGYN immediately. Gastrointestinal symptoms, like we talked about, that's GI, upset stomach, massive pain, aches, throbbing, and then weakness and dizziness and or potential fainting. Remember that if you are losing blood internally, it decreases your blood pressure, and when you go to stand up, you could potentially get dizzy, fall down. That's orthostatic hypotension at its finest. If you're feeling concerned, please go see your doctor immediately because this is one of those true surgical emergencies if the actual egg gets too large, the embryo, and it gets stuck inside of that tube and or if it's undiagnosed. Your physician or OBGYN can diagnose and be the person that is going to tell you 100% whether or not you have an ectopic pregnancy by using an ultrasound. So they'll be able to see where it is inside. Either it's in a tube or, luckily or hopefully, it's inside a uterus, so that it can grow. They may also want to do tests on your progesterone levels if they suspect an ectopic pregnancy, because low levels, again, low HCG levels and low progesterone levels can be a sign that you are having an ectopic pregnancy, or they may want to do a cutulocentesis. This is actually a procedure where they insert a needle into the space at the very top of the vagina, behind the uterus, and in front of the rectum to check to see if there's any blood. If there is blood, that basically means that the fallopian tube has ruptured and you will emergently be on your way to surgery.
Throwing up on a Tuesday? One puke story.
I was watching a TV show called Impractical Jokers, and one of the characters had to go undressed to an art class because he lost the bet, or he got the most amount of thumbs down. He had to go, he had to do this naked posing, and he was trying to cover his goods the entire time while they were painting him as a statue feature. The second the roller coaster pose with his hands straight up in the air and the rotation of the stand started, I laughed so hard I started to cry. I then peed my pants slightly and started coughing because I couldn't stop laughing. Then the puke came up full force, and my husband, watching all of this, starts dry heaving, making me puke even more. Thanks a lot, Isarelda, for that hilarious puke story. Everyone is on this health kick these days, so I thought I'd try all the rage, kombucha. Just the thought of its name again gives me the heebie-jeebies. A fermented drink that tastes like a juice. I heard of it and its probiotic features, thinking it would be great for me to add it to my pregnancy diet. I asked the hippie if there was supposed to be growth, which is like green mucus snot looking stuff on the bottom of the jar, and he said yes. So I took it home and drank a huge glass, week or two later than probably what I was supposed to. The next thing I know, my bathroom stall at work smelled just like the strawberry kombucha, and it tasted the same going in as it did out. Even my colleague asked me if I sprayed strawberry perfume to mask the puke, so I responded, nope, that's exactly what I'm throwing up. Thanks a lot, Kim, for your hilarious puke story. We're not going to try kombucha after 5 days anyway. I came home from work and thought I was alone. I started taking a shower with the music blasting, so I didn't hear my husband come creeping in. Since I have frosted glass doors, I saw a shadow behind the shower, and he screamed, "Boo!" I screamed so hard, punched the door, and vomited all over him, just like The Exorcist. I said, "Oh my gosh, you scared me shitless." And then he said, "No, I scared the puke out of you." Thanks again, Lisa, for your hilarious puke story. I have to say, I don't do well with scary stuff anyway. Do you have a hilarious puke story that you just can't wait to share with me? Send it, please. Pukeology, Pukeology @nomonaja.com, or tweet us at Pukeology so we can all have a good laugh.
Tips and tricks to stop the chuckle that you need.
Now, ladies, I know that this topic has hit home for a lot of people, and or it has been more of the somber podcast that I've ever really done. But it is something that needs to be stated, and you need to understand what an ectopic pregnancy is, just in case your friend says, "Hey, listen, these are the symptoms that I'm having." And remember that an ectopic pregnancy can be treated in various number of ways, but we're going to go through them from least emergent all the way through to the most emergent. So the first one is methotrexate. Methotrexate is a medication that has an anti-tumor activity. It's usually injected. And what it does is this anti-tumor activity inhibits the folic acid reductase, which is a big way of saying it inhibits the energy producing type cells that cause DNA synthesis. Basically, it stops the baby's cell growth so that the body can reabsorb the egg and its contents to save the fallopian tube. Again, what we're talking about is kind of like what Drano does to your drain if you have a big hairball. It eats it away, right? So that it's able to pass that water through. So think of methotrexate as a salvation or trying to save that tube by just killing off the cells that are currently there and reabsorbing that into the body. Unfortunately, everyone always asks me, is there any way to just shimmy and shake it into the uterus from the tube? Unfortunately, that has not been successful, or that has not been an accepted medical treatment for it, just because of the fact that usually you don't diagnose an ectopic pregnancy until it is too large to be accompanied there inside the fallopian tube. Now, number 2, if the tube has become very stretched, like we just talked about, beyond natural repair, or it has ruptured and is bleeding, an emergency surgery is performed to get the bleeding to stop, and you will most probably lose that fallopian tube. That's the reality of it. A laparoscopic surgery can be done. It is where they can remove the ectopic pregnancy and repair it and or remove the affected fallopian tube under the use of cameras. So they'll usually put 3, sometimes 4 cameras, depending, and that's what the laparoscopic part of it. They will use insufflated carbon dioxide air, and they will insufflate your stomach so it's nice and big. Don't worry, ladies, you are completely under general anesthetic, or you're on a very, very, very high spinal to make sure that it is facilitated for the actual procedure itself. Remember that if they can remove it and then stitch it back up, they can, but you do have an increased risk, and we'll talk about the risk factors thereafter, of getting an ectopic pregnancy in that same fallopian tube, because sometimes your body just doesn't want to stop the adhesions in the area. Now, risk factors. We started talking about it. If you've had this laparoscopic procedure before, and before we get on to the risk factors, let me just tell you guys, if a laparoscopic surgery is unsuccessful, meaning that there's just too much work to be done and they have to take the tube and there's something going on, like if you've had a lot of procedures in your abdomen, let's say you've had a tummy tuck, or let's say you've had your appendix taken out, your gallbladder, things like that, adhesions can make it hard for a laparoscopic surgeon to do his job, all using these little tiny ports and little tiny cameras. So instead, they can convert to what's called a laparotomy. Again, a laparotomy means an actual incision in the abdomen, because if you are bleeding, the number one method of what we need to do is to get the blood to stop, number one, and number two, remove that portion of the fallopian tube. So let's go back to risk factors for having an ectopic pregnancy. Advanced maternal age. That sticker is not on your chart for a reason. 35 to 44 years of age is what's considered a risk factor. Several induced abortions, previous ectopic pregnancies, pelvic inflammatory disease, if you are conceiving after having a tubal ligation like we talked about before, or while on an IUD is placed, those can both lead to an ectopic pregnancy. Smoking, believe it or not, has actually been researched and found. So it's not good to smoke, period, but even more reason if you are trying to get pregnant. Endometriosis, swelling of the endometrium, which is basically the lining itself of the uterus, causes a lot of bad painful bleeding during your periods. And again, if you have this endometriosis, it is a swelling component. And remember what we said, ectopic pregnancies is because of an inflammation in that actual area. And then undergoing fertility treatments or using fertility medications have also increased the risk, just because it's kind of like, we were talking about your shower. Imagine sticking a, big grade fire hose, right onto it. It might blow the whole gasket. So that's the reason why fertility treatments can potentially cause an ectopic pregnancy. Are there any chances of having a successful pregnancy after an ectopic pregnancy? Yes! Best news of the entire day. I will give you the statistics. If your fallopian tube has been left in place, you have a 60% chance of having a successful pregnancy in the future. Remember, ladies, you have 2 tubes and just 1 uterus. So even if you don't have 1 tube, that still means the other side can also render a nice, beautiful baby. Now that you know the science behind what an ectopic pregnancy is, signs and symptoms that you could potentially be having it, risk factors in place, and what that treatment is, I hope I've given you the ultimate best answers for information about a tubal pregnancy that there currently is to date. If you love me, Dr. Puke and Pregnancy Pukeology Podcast, let me know. 5-star ratings or hearts for likes. Don't forget to download this episode, but more importantly, share it with all your prego friends. And again, thank you so much for listening to Pukeology Podcast and Pregnancy, episode 23, Ectopic Pregnancy Complications.
Pukeology Podcast, edutainment at its finest.